Welcome to the Screenwriter's Journey, a writing shop's podcast that charts and celebrates each step in the story of a professional writer. Taking inspiration from the famed hero's journey story structure, we dive into the life and career of successful writers and learn how they navigated the challenges and embraced the opportunities that transformed their passion into their careers. Every writer's path is different. However, just like story structure, there's a lot of common beats to being a successful writer. And in this series, we explore each of these beats in detail to help you on your own writing path. My name is Chris Brennan, and today we're delighted to have screenwriter and writing coach Michael Barmish on to walk us through his very own screenwriter's journey. Michael, it's great to have you on board.
Hey, Chris, it's great to be here. Thanks.
So yeah, this is the inaugural episode. Thanks
I'm
for
honored.
taking the taking the ride with me. We'll see how this goes. As highlighted at the beginning, this is kind of born out of this concept where if I took the hero's journey, well, the writer's journey, the 12-step version of it, and I basically replaced the character, the protagonist on their quest with the career of a screenwriter. I thought it kind of lined up pretty nicely. So I thought this would actually make for a pretty decent series where I chart the story itself of the screenwriter and just kind of learn how they did it, where they found obstacles and challenges. And this is broken into 12 steps. And I even kept the three phases as well. So the first phase is the pull. So basically, what pulled you into this career. Then the next phase is the opportunity. So this is kind of how you navigated your early stages and kind of found opportunities for yourself. And then the third phase is the career. So kind of like the third act of a three-act structure, you know? So
Yeah.
that's basically the concept done in that nice, easy to understand circle. And yeah, so what I could do for this first round is describe what the actual hero's journey stage is and what it translates to the screenwriter's journey, and then ask you a question and how it relates to you and your career. Does that sound good, Michael?
Sounds great. Yeah.
Okay, so first step is the ordinary world. This is life before writing. So for you, Michael, what was your life like before you became a writer?
Well, it's actually an interesting question because I feel like I've been a writer my entire life. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to write plays, I wrote poems, I wrote short stories, but I went to university planning to get into advertising and copywriting. And when I graduated university, I ended up getting a job at a radio station and not really doing what I wanted to do, although it was a fun place to work and great people, but it left me kind of unfulfilled because I didn't really know where I was going. Radio being very obviously not being a visual medium, and I like to tell visual stories. Um, so it was, yeah. So that was kind of my ordinary world, just trying to figure out where my life was going to go.
Sweet. And what kind of thing did you do at this radio station?
Well, I started out as what they charitably call a producer, which is really a glorified board operator. And
Right.
I worked overnights. And if anybody remembers Larry King, he had a radio show, and I had to basically be a board operator to run the syndicated Larry King show, and then I graduated from there to full time working in the traffic department, which is not traffic like cars. It's advertising traffic. It's the scheduling of
Mhm.
commercials, and I was in charge of making sure the right commercials ran at the right time.
Was that a bit of quite a high intensity kind of position?
It could be. It would depend on time of year. I started out working for a radio station that didn't have quite the audience, and so it was a little more laid back. But then their sister station was a rock station, which was the number one station, and there was much busier, much more stressful because people who wanted to advertise, you'd have to squeeze them in, or you'd have to push people around, and it was kind of like a logic puzzle to try and get everything in, and dealing with account executives who could be high strung at times.
Right.
So yeah, but Ultimately, it was just a really fun group of people that I worked with. I probably never had a job that was as much fun in terms of where I worked, not necessarily what I did, but
Okay.
where I worked. Yeah.
And how long were you working there at the radio station?
I was working there for about 4 years, and then I went into advertising sales, thinking that, well, I'm not sure where I'm going, and if I want to stay in radio, the only way to make money is to sell advertising. And I did that for a year, and I absolutely hated it.
For the next stage, we have the call to adventure. We call it the calling, very similar. But what was that moment when you had like a significant inspiration to tell your own story or to tell a story, or was it that you wanted to become a writer? Like, what was that calling moment, if you can recall it specifically?
Yeah, well, I think when I was working in at the radio station initially, I also did get a chance to write radio commercials there.
Mhm.
If they wanted to try and get a new advertiser, sometimes they would mock up a commercial, and so I did that, and actually got a lot of good feedback on it. But it made me realize these are not the stories I want to tell.
Okay.
And I always loved movies. Speaking of the hero's journey, I mean, Star Wars was probably the film that got me into wanting to write. And I just had an idea, and I kind of I got Sid Field's book, read it, paid a lot of money for a personal computer because it was well before the days where everybody had their own computer, and I just started writing, and I found that I just got lost in it, even though I didn't really know what I was doing at the time.
Right.
I just felt different when I was writing a story. And it just made me realize that this is something that I potentially want to pursue. However, at the time, my dilemma was I really didn't want to go to LA. And everybody said, you have to go to LA. And what changed that was I ended up quitting my sales job because I was so miserable. And I went and backpacked in Europe. First time
Mhm.
I ever went on, backpacking on my own and going country to country. And it just made me realize that, I don't have to stay in my safe space back home. I found myself in strange places with strange languages, didn't know what I was doing, but I did it. I got around, I figured things out. And I think it gave me the strength to realize that I can make that move, and it could be good for me. So that was kind of the inspiration, from the writing to the actual making the decision that I'm going to go to LA. And I don't know if I jumped ahead too far or not
No,
in
no,
the journey.
no, it's all connected, right? But just
Yeah.
to go back to the calling, so when you started pursuing it, that makes total sense that you're doing some marketing and there's a bit of storytelling to that. It's a bit of creativity. You are a film fan. Did you have an idea of what could become a good film, or do you have more of a desire to tell stories, but you just did not even have a concept of what a story from you would sound like or look like?
The latter, for sure,
Okay.
because the first, the story I came up with, it was one of those, what if kind of situations, but it was a crime drama, and
Right.
it was the one and only time that I've ever written a crime drama. I've never written one since, because I realized that it wasn't really the genre that I preferred to write.
Right.
Found myself, people naturally tended to laugh at things that I would write. Like I would actually write um, newsletters or promotional things for the radio station, or they had a newsletter, and they asked me to write articles, and I always used humor in
Mhm.
everything, whether it was advertising or whether it was that. And I wasn't using humor in this story. And
Right.
so I felt like this isn't really what I want to write, but I wanted to finish it. I wanted the satisfaction of completing a screenplay.
So this was actually a screenplay or just kind of like an outline of what a beginning, middle, and end of a story itself?
This was actually a screenplay.
Oh, sweet. And you learned that from Sid Field's book, was it? Like how to
Yeah,
structure it and
I was self-taught. Yeah.
okay, interesting.
So
Back
even though I
when
did go
you
to
had
film
to do
school,
it that way.
yeah, yeah, even though technically I went to film school, it was my degree was at Temple University.
Mhm.
The degree is communications, but the major was radio, television, film. Yes, it was that long
Okay.
ago that radio was part of the major. But
And it was the first one in the title too, wasn't
yeah, yeah,
it?
yeah. And
That's good.
but then you could take certain tracks, and the track that I took was more advertising, an
Right.
advertising track within that. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, it's funny, even for myself. Like I remember feeling the desire to tell a story, and the first one I thought of was a short film, and it was a silent zombie film set in rural Ireland called That was I had a very strong vision of what that would be, but the fact that I had a very clear concept, I got really excited about it, and I kind of pursued that. And that's kind of where I've been ever since. Is once you kind of latch onto an idea and you kind of keep shaking it until it makes sense to you.
That
So
would
I can
actually be
totally
funny
appreciate
to
that.
if it got produced to hear people get in line to purchase a ticket for that.
Yeah.
Two for
Yeah, that's it.
yeah.
Yeah, so interesting. So you started off with a crime film,
Yeah.
and you finished that script. Was it a feature script as well?
It was a feature script, yeah.
Do you remember the plot? Are you comfortable talking about the actual plot of that? I'm so
Yeah,
curious what these
it was about it was about a police detective who is investigating a serial crime. The killer is actually caught at the beginning and
okay,
is and gets off on a technicality.
okay.
And after that, there's another murder that it follows a similar pattern.
Right.
And the police detective discovers that his wife committed the murder. And now he has to decide,
Oh.
does he want to turn her in or does he want to frame the other guy for the murder?
Wow, there's like I've seen quite a few like classic noirs that have very similar stories to that. They're fantastic. So
Yeah,
I think you're in good company there. The police officer investigating the crime has to now cover it up.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, very good. So then the next step on here, you kind of highlighted yourself. So you got this pull, this calling to do it, but your resistance moment, like in Hero's Journey, there's the refusal of the call. Sounds like your resistant moment was you didn't want to go to LA. What was the kind of lack of motivation, I suppose? What was your hesitancy about traveling to Los Angeles?
Yeah, I guess if a therapist were to come up with it, it would be the fear of leaving the comfort of your the people you know, the friends and family, and going somewhere completely different. And
Hmm.
um, I just I didn't LA didn't really interest me in terms of making such a big move.
Right.
Um, but then like I said, and I think it was just because I had never really gotten out of the security of growing up in suburban America.
Right.
When I went to university, it was really my first experience with such diverse people. I mean, and diverse points of view and things like that. So I definitely would say I probably lived a more sheltered existence, having grown
Right.
up in the suburbs. So I think that was part of it. I think there was a fear of, can I do this on my own? I don't have, I'm going somewhere completely. It's a huge commitment to go somewhere completely new. I had never been to LA when I moved there. I
Hmm.
actually just packed up what I could in my car and just drove out. I had never been to LA. I didn't know anybody in LA. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a place to live. I just
Right.
went. So I went from one extreme to the other. I went from the safety and security to throw caution in the wind and just do it.
Right. Right. You're crossing the threshold,
Yeah,
huh?
yeah. But like I said, that experience of traveling, which is something that I think everyone should do. Everyone should experience that. That really that really gave me a sense of maturity, a sense of adventure, and a sense of um, just what's the word I'm trying to think of? Just confidence to do
Right.
it. So it was really a life changing experience.
Great. So then you said that you went to LA and you didn't know anybody. The next section on the journey is meeting your mentor. So, what was the earliest or most significant moment where you received help along the way? This could be a mentor figure or a friend, family member, colleague, maybe somebody from the industry that um, reached out and just gave you that lifeline when you needed it at that moment.
Well, one of the reasons why I moved to LA when I did was I sent a ton of query letters to producers. And again, that's when query letters were physical letters that you just stick in the mail. And of course, nobody would read it. Nobody would, if they even bothered to answer, except
Right.
one guy who was an assistant producer at a company wrote me back and said, I'm from Philadelphia and you're from my hometown. I'll take a look at your script.
Right.
So I sent him the script, and he wrote back and said you should really think about coming to LA.
Wow. Was this the
So
crime one that you wrote?
this was the crime one, which to me
Okay.
today is shocking because I would never show that to anybody. But
Right.
I
How
guess
many
there was
pages
enough.
was it? Do you remember the page count?
God, probably around 100 pages, I would say.
Okay.
100,
Nice.
yeah. So that was the final push
Right.
to go out there. And so when I got there, we met. We met for lunch, and I
Mhm.
just remember it was like one of those very. It was actually, what was the name of the restaurant? It's the one that was in the movie Heat, where
Okay.
where they met. It was that restaurant. I don't think it's there anymore. I think it closed down. But
Right.
it was like one of these very trendy. Like there was calf brains omelets on the menu, so it was just one of these very trendy restaurants, and
Mhm.
had no concept of what where ballet was or anything like that. And
Mhm.
so so yeah, so we met, and we actually didn't. I don't know why we didn't stay in touch after that. But I guess that would be. So I don't know if you really say that was more like a mentor moment, but he didn't necessarily become a mentor of mine.
Right. Well, just like in the hero's journey, these things can evolve and have different definitions. Like you can take this as somebody who helps you immediately on your path, gives you the initial push, these kind of things. There's no prescription way. This was kind of developed as kind of a theory first and then used as a story structure second, right? Great. So he likes it. You then go to LA. Did you what was like your first couple of days like? Do you remember? Like you had to find a place to live. You had to get
Yes,
a job, right? Or did you have savings that you brought along with you?
I had some saving, but not much. And
Right.
so shortly before I went to bartending school, and I got my
Oh,
bartending certificate, my mixologist, and I was
yeah.
working at. And I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but I was working at the Olive Garden back
Oh,
home, and as bartender.
right.
And so when I went to LA, um, I stayed I stayed at a hotel because my cousin uh, was a in management, and got me the friends and family rate.
Hmm.
So I was able to stay pretty cheaply, and then I immediately had to find a roommate. And actually, the guy who read my script, he had a friend who was looking for a roommate, but I really wanted to live by the beach, and he didn't live at the beach. So I said, "Well, let me just see what else is out there." Um,
You're immediately picky. I love
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it.
Um,
I come with
and
nothing. I'll take something else.
yeah, yeah. I ended up rooming with him. We were roommates,
Okay.
and then I went to the Olive Garden in Westwood, which is right by UCLA,
Hmm.
and um, talked my way into a job there.
Okay.
And so yeah, so within the first week or so, actually the job I got on day two, then I got the place to live. So it actually pretty quickly I got settled in. Uh,
Right.
yeah, and had a good community of friends by working at the restaurant, um, which is how the next step in my journey came about. I was waiting on these two girls. We were talking.
Yeah.
They're both actors. One of
Okay.
them says, "Oh, I work at this deli in Brentwood, and
Yeah.
there's this young producer who comes in every day, and he said, oh, if you ever meet a young writer, have him come in and meet me." So the next day, I go in, and she's there, and she introduces me to this young
Right.
producer, and he reads that same script and liked the writing enough that
Hmm.
he wanted to work with me in developing another script, an idea that I had, which is more along the lines of what I like to write, which is a romantic comedy.
Okay. Interesting.
And he was a very he's young. He was young, very aggressive, very dedicated. Um, he was a producer. I mean, he knew how to meet the right people, and so he was really a good person for me to get involved with. And so we developed this project, and then another project as well. So a couple of spec scripts. It was a time when spec scripts were really hot, so it was a
Right.
good time to write spec scripts.
Well, that's really interesting because in the hero's journey, it's tests, allies, and enemies, but we have it as challenges and community. So it's basically like there's going to be a point where you get involved in the industry, you start growing your network, you meet gatekeepers, but you meet like inspirational people that can really just kind of connect you. And literally, you're like, this is the next stage. I met people who introduced me to others. And
Yeah,
that's so interesting because you did that through your bartending career, through
yeah,
actually networking professionally. Like I used to be a bartender as well. One of my biggest moments was a customer came in and we hit it off, and then we ended up developing a working relationship because of that. And I was like, I'm in a bar, like this is where it actually finally happened, you know? So it was really
yeah.
fascinating.
Well, because there's no pressure, there's no expectation, and if you meet somebody in in networking is great, but if you meet someone in a networking, you're both there for networking, and there's there's always that, oh, I'm here for business. But when it becomes more casual,
Right.
sometimes I think it's better, it's stronger.
Well, as you say, like it's more organic as well. Like
Yeah, yeah,
there's a friendship that can blossom. Like those events are good to go to, networking events,
yeah, oh, yeah,
industry kind of festivals and things like that. However, when I go, I do see the crowd of people waiting for their turn to speak, and like
right,
they
right,
they can't wait to pitch the thing they probably didn't rehearse enough. And it's like this is not natural. Like this is not how you kind of build a relationship that
right.
has value. You're kind of looking at that person like, I can't wait to use them for my benefit. It's like, that's not how anybody wants to be treated. So we've got this whole thing backwards. When you actually
Yeah,
have it done in that kind of meet somebody through work area where you have a shared vision or goals, you gradually get to conversating and talking about it, and that's where an opportunity that actually has substance comes out of it. Like they say, the elevator pitch, it's really important to have, but how many times have you pitched in an elevator and
Right,
that
right.
actually benefited you? Like, yeah, I like
Yeah,
that 1 minute thing. Let's go. What's your name, sir? That kind
yeah.
of thing. Great. So your colleagues introduced you to, was this a producer then that you met?
Yeah. So he hadn't produced anything at the time. He was young, he was
Yeah.
starting out. And
Yeah.
so yeah, so I met with him, and yeah, and he was he was really he knew what the market wanted. He was good at that, and he was also I learned a lot from him in terms of development. And I also learned a
Right.
lot from him in terms of not being so precious about my writing.
Right. Okay. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So this first associate producer sounds like the kind of the person who helped give you the push, but this one actually sounds more like the actual mentor that you required for longevity purposes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely.
You had a you pitched your other idea that was closer to your true passion, which is romantic comedies. Would you be able
Yeah.
to tell me a little bit about what that actual idea was?
Yeah, it was about a fading actress,
Hmm.
very difficult to work with, people, and a new hotshot young agent.
Okay.
And it was called May December. And of course, being a romantic comedy, him being young, she being older. So it was an older woman, younger man relationship. And again, I wouldn't show it. I'm not sure I would show it. It would need a lot of updating, but also the comment that everybody said was nobody wants to see movies about Hollywood. But the good thing was that it became a really, really good writing sample that actually
Mhm.
led to being hired to write my first professional screenplay.
Oh, interesting. So we've kind of went through the next stage, which in hero's journey is to approach the innermost cave, but for us, it's sharpening your craft. So it sounds like this producer you met, you did he pay you to do the spec script, or was it just you guys worked in collaboration on this with the hopes of selling it at a later date? Was there an option
Yeah,
involved? Or?
there was no compensation involved.
Okay.
Yeah,
But this is where you were sharpening your craft and like really learning by
yeah,
doing, which is always impressive, but you also have some guidance along the way. Great. So then we came to what we called a preparation meets opportunity.
right.
So it wasn't clear sailings, but you highlighted that you got to your first sale. Can you tell me kind of how that happened? So your you've written a couple of specs, specifically your romantic comedy. You've developed, you sharpened your craft. Now you're kind of breaking into not exactly the big success, but like your first initial success.
Yeah. So through this producer, so he has had a friend, a good friend who worked for a production company. He was like
Hmm.
executive producer at a production company. They did mostly, I mean, let's call it what it is. They did mostly schlocky direct-to-video thrillers,
Right.
and so he gave him my romantic comedy,
Okay.
and he really, really liked the writing,
Oh, nice.
and so they called me in to tell they had an idea for a screenplay, and they wanted to see if it was something that would be interested in tackling.
Okay.
And so I went in, and now their offices are on Sunset Boulevard, high rise, the tallest building on Sunset Boulevard. I'm in the office, picture windows looking over the Hollywood Hills. I'm thinking, I've made it. This is great. It's like this is
Preparation meets opportunity. Here it
yeah.
is.
And so I meet him, and I meet a couple of other the executives, and the marketing executive who
Mhm.
had come up with this idea. And the idea was a sci-fi um,
Mhm.
story that I'm not gonna. I don't know if I should actually say what it is because well, I guess I can. So it's
I'm very curious right now.
yeah.
Like,
So it's a sci-fi about a kid who has fallen into a crack in the earth and has been
right,
raised by underground mole people. And
right.
now there is a huge earthquake about to hit the surface world, and they have to send him back to warn everybody.
Gotcha.
And in my mind, I'm thinking, you read a romantic comedy,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's literally where I went to going like, a
and
rom-com guy can do this?
yeah, and I'm thinking, how am I going to do this? But of course, the outside part of me is like, oh yeah, this sounds great. And certainly, I love a challenge. But
Right,
I'm just going through. I'm trying to think. They must really like my writing a lot to pitch this to me to write.
right.
So I say yeah, and so they hire me. I sign a contract, my very first contract,
Very
and
good.
and I get paid to write an outline and a first draft. And they were very receptive to my bringing humor into it as well, which they really like. So it made me definitely much more engaged with the project.
Right.
Um, and then
But this
um,
kind of genre, there's an audience for this, like as we
oh yeah,
can call it, like schlocky kind of thing. There's an audience for it, but they also embrace the humor of it. There's nothing wrong with kind of winking, going, we know, like
right,
we
right.
know. Have
And
fun
I
with this
even
ride that we're taking you on with the mole people.
and I even brought in a little bit of romantic comedy elements because there was the girl that he was in love with when they were kids before he fell into the earth, and
Okay.
now he goes to find her um,
Yeah,
to
why
help
not?
warn.
Like,
Yeah, so it
yeah.
actually it
You're
actually was
warming to this already, aren't you?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It was a I think it would have been a fun project had it gone to completion.
Right.
However, um, the the guy who's the head of marketing, whose idea was, he decided to leave the company and start his own company.
Right.
So the project died. But the good thing was, he then hired me to write because he wanted to focus on more family type films. So he
Right.
hired me to write a family comedy that did get produced.
Was this in the center of the earth as well?
No, this is
Or
completely different. This was actually more along the lines
is
of the
it
first
a
script.
mole man rom-com?
Yeah, no, this is more in line with the first script I ever wrote because it was called Kid Cop, about a kid
Okay.
who wants to follow in his late father's footsteps and be a cop,
Right.
and discovers a crime that seems to be too small, so the police aren't really interested, and he continues to investigate with his friends,
Mhm.
and of course they solve the crime.
Right.
And
Well, that's excellent.
yeah,
So the marketer or the person in charge of marketing for one company is the one who came up with the idea for the Mole Man film, and then he left and hired you to write this Kid Cop film. Was that his
yeah,
idea as well? That he said, "I've got this other idea."
it was his idea. Yeah, actually,
Okay.
he called me in and pitched a different idea,
Okay.
and I don't remember what the idea was. But then somehow in the conversation came up that he was also thinking of doing this about a cop, kid.
Right.
And I said, "Oh, that sounds more fun." And because of my writing style, he didn't think to pitch that to me because he didn't think I could do kind of a mystery type script. I said, yeah, I could do that. And
You hired a rom-com guy to do the Mole Man film, but
right,
now
right. I can write
the rom-com
anything,
guy
right?
can't do a mystery.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. Well, that's fascinating. But it also like that's really important for writers in my own experience too. Because I went into rooms where I'm like, I didn't even mean for this to sound like the way it did. I went in saying I got two ideas I'm working on. One is for me, and I pitched one. And they're like, oh, tell us about the other one. I'm like, oh, that's mine. And I was kind of being reluctant with it. That was genuine. And they ended up being more excited about that one. And I left going, well, one, having more than one idea is important. And two, I
Yeah.
really built that one up to be intriguing. And I didn't really mean to. I just was truthful going, I actually want to keep this, but just so you know, I'm working on a couple of ideas. So it is
Right, right.
beneficial going with more than one idea.
Yeah.
Even if it's from the writer's perspective, that is. So this producer then hires you to write Kid Cop.
Yes. Yeah.
And how did that process go? Like, so this
That
is
was
so.
it was very low budget, and
Mhm.
I had to write obviously for budget. Um there were we had, of course, we had some development. It was usually it was him, myself, a couple of other development people, um and his assistant. And
Right.
so we would just, initially a brainstorming session, and then then the outline, then first draft. And I mean, the budget was, I think it was originally supposed to be like $500,000.
Mhm.
So very, very, very small. And they actually upped it a little bit, which was good, because that meant they had to pay me a little bit more. But
Right.
there were a lot of it was a learning experience, because you have to please all these different people. Somehow you have to take all the notes, incorporate the notes, and still come up with something that pleases
Right.
everybody. And then there were a lot of things that were cut out, um, for for um, for budgetary reasons, because they wanted to have a name actress for the mother of the kid.
Okay.
But because of that, she could only be in one location, and that location, nothing really happens. She could only be in the house,
Mhm.
and so she's just there to really scold the kid when he's running around. But I had to take her out of the really the story, and try and create a story, um,
Right.
to give her something, that had some weight to it. Um, and then yeah, I had this grandmotherly character, who I really liked, but then they decided they wanted to hire a younger actress for it, so I had to rewrite that, um, which was kind of weird, because I had to make a grandmotherly character younger. Um,
I was
and then
thinking, like, is she younger than the mother character?
not that young, no, no, but
Okay.
yeah. Um, and then yeah, just, I mean, because of location, um, it just restricted a lot, and I had to cut a lot. And then even during the production, I had to cut things, um,
Mhm.
that I wasn't happy to cut. I had to cut. And even a couple of the actors came up to me and said they were so upset that what was cut, because they really liked. But the two actors that played the villains, they had a lot of fun lines that were cut, and they were,
Mhm.
so there was a lot of compromise, but it was a learning experience. I mean, I learned a lot in terms of, again, not being so precious about things, but also how to write, for budget, and also for, who the producer wants to hire to be in it. There's a lot of, it was a learning experience. Ultimately, it was a really, really, a really great experience. Um, Despite the frustrations that happened at the time, because of course Like I said, I mean, I had to make a lot of compromises, but ultimately I learned a lot from it, and it was a valuable experience.
What's so funny, I think one of the biggest lessons in those exact moments is the compromise itself.
Yeah,
I think every writer who he hits that point actually just is shocked at the level of compromise, and there's a freak out moment where they're like, I'm not even sure if this is even closely resembling what I initially wanted it to be. Like, it's actually, it's getting out of my hands, but I guess that's what you're being paid for, is can you just keep it going no matter what, despite the
yeah,
changes?
yeah,
It's an incredible important moment, but yeah, the big learning lessons. But usually it's the splash of cold water of, there's a lot more compromises than I could have ever possibly imagined for this one
yeah,
project, where we
yeah,
kind of agreed that this was the story going in, but it's incredible how much changes little by little occur from all these different stakeholders and decision makers along the way.
yeah. And then the other lesson is, even after it's shot, there's lessons because they added lines in post production, ADR,
Mhm.
that kind of made me cringe, and I didn't want to take credit, have to take credit for those lines.
Right.
But of course, I am the sole writer, so I get the credit for the corny lines. But
Were
so
these lines where they just thought the audience needed to have like very spoon-fed kind of information?
no,
They were worried about like the audience not understanding, or was it more kind of, let's get a joke in here by just,
yeah, it was more that I think
okay.
there wasn't, like, at the end there's the chase scene and the action scene, and maybe they just felt like, because there was no dialogue, it was just, it was a chase scene, and they kind of peppered in these little one liners that I guess were supposed to be for comedy, but
Right, right.
but yeah, they were not funny.
So that makes perfect sense. So that actually was the breakthrough. Well, I was
Yeah,
that stage of the journey. So after that, so you finished this, it was produced. This is a
it was
very big
produced.
moment. Um, and usually this is where, with a film, a writer has a couple of years to really take advantage of that success. About after 2 years or so, it's kind of like, okay, what else have you done? But you can kind of get credit for that or leverage this to help your career, which is the next step, which is navigating initial success or the road back, as you
Yeah,
like to return.
that's
So this is where this is a very critical stage, I think, because so many writers focus on like the actual immediate, like, oh, I need to get this one thing done. It's very rare that they step back and have kind of a macro strategic look at their own career. Can you tell me a little bit about this exact moment? So you're still on the high of, I wrote a film and it was made. What were these next kind of steps like, and what kind of decisions did you make at this point in your career?
well, this is where things kind of took not the best turn, because well, the irony is that, so afterwards the producer says to me, I think I want to give Mole Man another shot, because
Oh,
he had a connection at Sci-Fi Channel, so he resurrected it. Um, and I got paid to write another draft. But then the Sci-Fi Channel, they wanted to completely change the story from, basically page one, and it wasn't what he wanted to do, so he kind of dropped it. So
was it still Mole Man?
it
They
was
still
still
wanted a Mole
was
Man.
it
Okay.
still was. But so the irony is, I got paid for a project twice that didn't get produced, but at least I got paid twice. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, and so then, well, so I also had a spec script um, that went out. This was actually just before Kid Cup was produced.
Mhm.
Was also a family comedy satire, and again, this was at the height of the spec market, and if it had gone out after Kid Cop was produced, chances are it would have sold. But because I didn't have any track record,
Right.
it needed work, and we all agreed it needed work. But because they didn't know whether, because I had never taken a script from spec to production, they didn't know whether they wanted to take the chance. So it kind,
Mhm.
but it ended up it did get optioned. I don't remember where, but it did get optioned. But nothing really after that happened with that. And then the biggest problem with Kid Cop was so the company that produced it, they primarily are a distribution company.
Mhm.
And the deal that they made was that Kid Cop would be released in Europe and not in the US until after.
Okay.
It took 4 years for it to get released in the
Oh,
US.
wow.
So I had no momentum because it's not like, you know, I had no proof of anything. Nobody could see anything. There was nothing for me to send to anybody. So I was kind of back to where I was in that, I would send things out. I had a few things that were optioned. So
Yeah.
it wasn't like, but that kind of stalled the momentum that I had. Also, then he decided to focus more on distribution and not so much on development and production.
Okay.
So so that's sort of how things went a little off the path. Um, and then by then I was getting burned out waiting on tables, and so I ended up taking a full-time job, which I still would write, but of course I didn't have the time that I did before. When you wait tables, obviously you have much more free time,
Yeah,
flexible
that's right.
time. So so yeah, the journey took yeah it like I said, I had some success in terms of having projects optioned, but nothing beyond that.
Mhm. Then what was the job that you took? You moved from waitering into what kind of profession then?
Well, then I went to work for Final Draft.
Oh, interesting. So at least you're still in the
Yeah.
screenwriting world then as such.
So when I was working for Final Draft,
Yeah.
I also did have the opportunity to do some one-on-one tutorials, and sometimes those tutorials, even though it's supposed to be on the software, we would get into discussion of the script itself. And then
Okay, interesting.
I would give some feedback and some tips, and people really liked what I had to say. Um, and then I also had a period where I had some personal things that kind of took me away from writing, and then after that, I decided to refocus on writing, and I took this class, and then through that, the teacher she has a kind of advanced writing workshop by
Mhm.
invitation only, and she invited me to that, and through that, I really developed my skills on giving critique and feedback.
Okay.
Um, and then she even at one point let me kind of co-teach a class with her, because I said I would
Okay.
really like to get more into teaching. And she said, "Well, if you want to, I have a class coming up. If you want to co-teach with me," and so I did that and really enjoyed it. And then and then I moved to Berlin, and I met a person who runs or did run Rain Dance Berlin. So Rain Dance, which is based in London, they have a film festival, they have classes. So they were having screenwriting classes, and so I was able to do some of their screenwriting classes, and then that led to where I am now, which is Met Film, which is
Mhm.
also London based, but they have a campus here in Berlin, and I'm the discipline lead for the MA screenwriting program. So I'm teaching a master's program here.
That's fantastic. So you started in radio, and then you made it to LA, got a few screenplays off the ground until eventually you got one made. And then from there, you transitioned into more support area with the premier writing software for screenwriters. And then you learned a new craft, which was education. And now you actually teach people the art of screenwriting. And you still write on the side then, or you write as well, not as much on the side.
Yeah, I had, and that's one of the advantages of being here in Europe is that producers are more accessible to writers
Yeah.
than in LA. And so I started building community here. I run the Berlin Screenwriters Network, where for international screenwriters here in Berlin.
Right.
And I went to a TV series festival because I had never really, well, when I first moved to LA, I was open to television or film. I always preferred film, but I liked television. It just so happened the people that I met were
Hmm.
film. So up until coming here, I've always focused on film. Here is much more television focused. At the time when I
Right.
got here, met became friends with a lot of people who are either, in television or getting into television, writers trying to get into television. And so I had developed some projects, one that did get optioned by a producer here, a TV series project. Actually, two TV series projects that did get optioned here. Um, and so there are some various TV series festivals throughout Europe. There's um, there's one in Lille, France, which is a big one, but there's a smaller one. I'm not sure if it didn't have it this year. A smaller TV festival in Fontainebleau, which is outside of Paris.
Hmm.
And so I went to that, and there was someone there from a company in London, and he's involved with developing a drama series for Europe, but they have another division where they do these very, not to I'm not putting them down, but I'm saying very kind of formulaic rom-com Christmas movies that air, on Hallmark Channel, a lot of it, I mean, Netflix. They're very, very popular. People,
People love
has
it. Yeah.
those, yeah, yeah. And so I had actually become friends with a LA writer who came here one summer because he was head writing a series that was set in Berlin. We were just talking, and he said, you should consider maybe doing some of these, do a spec, and see. So I wrote a
Right.
spec, and it just so happened that somebody who I knew at the festival knew this guy, introduced me, and so he said, "Oh, send me the script, and I'll forward it." It took several emails for him to respond, but he finally did, and they liked the script. It needed a lot of work because it didn't quite fit the. It was a little more edgy than,
Right. Right.
but they liked the premise. They liked the concept, and so they bought it and hired me to develop it, and it changed a lot, but it got produced 2 years ago, and it aired in U.S. and Canada television. I think it also aired in France. Um, a friend of mine told me that he saw it on a French channel.
What's it called?
It's called
Yeah.
Love in Whitbrook.
Love in Whitbrook.
Yeah, yeah,
Fantastic. Well, that's
yeah,
really funny. So you start out writing crime, but you have a true passion for rom-coms. You make your way navigating through LA, actually it might be a comedy, but there's crime elements because it is a kid cop and it's a mystery.
right,
But eventually you have to go all the way to Europe to eventually write a rom-com.
right. That gets produced.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. Oh,
yeah.
that's really cool.
So the journey, it's still going. Always looking for something new. I'm always working on something new. I've got scripts that I'm still passionate about writing, and if anybody wants to take a look, I'm always open to it. Like I said, I run the Berlin Screenwriters Network here, in Berlin. So if you're in Berlin, check us out. We have a happy hour once a month where we just kind of get a bunch of screenwriters together, and you can reach out to me on Instagram and my agent, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and I think from your journey, you can see firsthand the benefits of the community aspect. Like time and time again, we're gonna start seeing how once you get into the system and once you start getting into tracking your journey, there only takes a certain amount of time before you meet somebody who knows somebody who can help you along the way. So the meetups and these kind of screenwriter communities are so important. If you're in Berlin, it's important, or if it's in your own local area. This is actually how you can supercharge that career and push it to the next stages. But yeah, so that's it. So we went through all 12 steps of the screenwriter's journey. As you can see, they don't always line up linearly, like in the hero's journey, where you actually would have met your mentor after you've written your first story, whereas a lot of times people actually are they find the writing of their first story, or more specifically, finishing their first story, is quite a difficult thing. So the mentor figure comes in to really help them out. But either way, it actually tracks very closely to the 12 steps of the screenwriter's journey. So thank you so much, Michael, for coming on board this inaugural episode. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Yeah, I really did. I really enjoyed it. It's fun to kind of look back on things, and kind of, I mean, it makes me kind of contemplate where I've been and where I've gone, and hopefully where I'm going to continue to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's plenty more to go. And you've learned so many lessons along the way. And it's so funny how one of your main earliest goals you actually succeeded at by leaving the area where people told you you would find that success. You went to another continent and they're finally
Yeah,
like, okay, we would like you to write a spec script on a rom-com. That's
yeah.
wonderful. So that's all we have for today's episode. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe for more. This is Writing Chops, the screenwriter's journey. My name is Chris Brennan, and this has been Michael Barmish. And until next time, take care, guys.